Hey there, hello there. It's Jeff Cutter. I welcome you to the prologue to the 2021-22 NCAA Football Cup. That December yearly tradition is on, and of course, as always, almost always, it will be the PS2 version, not NCAA Football 11, having all these rosters and all that stuff. So, in this video, I will show you the first round matchups and talk to you about the road to the championship game. So, one major change from last year, well, two major changes. Number one is that now, last year had the pod system because of all the COVID stuff, and they had to play in one stadium with 4 teams and then have like double headers and all that. But not anymore. The old system of the first round of 64 would have the better seeded team face the lower seeded team in their stadium, and there'll be some examples of lower seeded teams actually hosting higher seeded teams because of the higher seeded teams not having a good field, and they want like revenue and all that stuff. So everyone goes back to their home stadiums and such. So of course, as always, round one happens at NCAA stadiums, like stadiums of some teams that like on campus stadiums and all that. And then rounds 2 through on is matchups like neutral site games, like being at the Independence Bowl, the Gator Bowl, the Outback Bowl, all that stuff. There is a slight change this year than last year. This year's biggest change is that the Final Four will be at a college football bowl game site, like one of the big 5, Cotton, Orange, Rose, Sugar, and Fiesta. Always what happens is that there would be 4 of those 5 bowls would actually host what we call group finals, and then the Final Four would play at EA Sports Stadium in Redwood, California. And one of the 5 of them would have to host a round of 16, not a quarterfinal. However, I've changed my tone. So using randomization and all that, the Rose Bowl will host the Final Four, which means there will be an Orange Bowl group, a Cotton Bowl group, a Sugar Bowl group, and a Fiesta Bowl group. And of course, the champions will be playing at those 4 stadiums. So I will show you, as I always do, like using the Affluent Sports College Football Preview, which somehow I managed to pick up from Sobeys and all that. Like I do this college football preview, and I always try to do this. So the rules are simple. The top 64 teams get in and all that. There are some caveats. Now, of course, everybody plays 12 games except for Hawaii, who plays 13. So, putting everyone on a level playing field, everyone gets a quote-unquote 13th game. And then during the season, during bye weeks, they have 2 people with the same bias and all that would face each other. There are some teams that actually ended up having their 13th game not even be played because of lack of people for bye weeks and all that. So, yeah. Now, the rule, of course, is that majority rules. You have to win 7 games out of 13. Now, you can retain it 2 ways. One way is to win 7 games without having to rely on the quote-unquote 13th game being simulated. Or 2 is 6 wins in the regular season, plus you win your 13th game, you're automatically in. But this year I've made some moves. I looked at every team's projection, every conference's projections, and put down how many spots I will automatically give spots to. And then I would put wildcard spots, a maximum of whichever wildcard teams. The faster you get in with 7 wins without being one of the 8 people, the better chance you get into a wildcard and all that. Now, I will show you each conference individually, of course, to show you what I mean. So over here, in here, hopefully you can see, is that in the ACC you see 5 brackets. That means 5 spots automatically go to the ACC out of the 64 teams, and a maximum of 3 wild cards to try to get wild cards into the spots. There were 48 spots automatic. 2 out of every 3 spots were automatic. I think that's right. No, 3 out of 4. Yeah, 3 out of 4 spots were automatic to like conferences and all that, and then the other 16 spots would have to go to wild cards. So, as you can see, hopefully you can see, there were 5 teams that qualified. The teams that qualified were Clemson, NC State, Boston College, Pitt, and Virginia. They all qualified with 7 wins, the fastest. There were some wild cards. Boston College got in as a wild card. Oh, let's say Clemson, NC State, Boston College, Wake Forest, Miami, Pitt, and Virginia. So 5 of them got in automatically, and 2 of them were in as wild cards. Miami beat Virginia Tech on the final day of eligibility to get into the tournament as a wild card. So as a wild card, you're probably prone to be in the lower half of the group. And now comes the American Conference. As you can see here, there were 3 spots that were up for grabs, and then automatically, and then 2 wild cards. The teams that qualified, well, both wild cards were. The teams that qualified were Cincy, Central Florida, Houston, SMU, and East Carolina. They all qualified for the tournament. So those spots are in. So big surprise. Big surprise. Not really a big surprise. One of the biggest surprises in the ACC is Louisville not making it. But Louisville also had 7 wins, but because Miami and Virginia Tech had to face each other, and because they didn't qualify fast, Louisville did, then they were at the mercy of the final weekend. Okay, so we got the Big 12. The Big 12. So 5 teams from the Big 12 would qualify automatically, and 2 would get in as wildcards potentially. So the teams that did qualify were Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, K-State, Baylor, and Texas Tech. They didn't have any wildcard teams move on. And as you can see by the X's, few shocks. Iowa State shockingly didn't qualify. Texas didn't qualify. Texas Christian didn't qualify. Surprises among them. Let's see. Big 10. They had 5 automatic spots and a maximum of 3 wild cards to get in. And they got 1, 2, 3, 4. They got 7 spots. 7 spots were up for grabs. Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota for one half of the Big 10. The other half were Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and Michigan State, who were picked to do terribly. But Michigan State pulled out all the stops. Let's see here. Conference USA, they had 3 automatic spots with 2 wild cards potentially. So as you can see here, they used up all 5 spots potentially. Marshall, Western Kentucky, UAB, San Antonio, and UTEP are all in. So biggest surprise, not really a lot of surprises in the Conference USA. The Mid-American had 3 automatic spots with 2 wild cards, and they used up all 5. The funny thing is that every team in the MAC East, Buffalo, Ohio, Kent, Miami, Ohio, Akron, and Bowling Green all did not qualify. And the 5 spots were taken by everyone in the MAC West, as you see here, with the exception of Ball State. So it was kind of strange to see one conference take all 5 spots potentially for the MAC. Mountain West had 4 automatic spots with 3 wildcard potential chances. So seeing this, they took up 6 spots. Boise, Air Force, Utah State, San Diego State, Fresno, and Nevada all got in. But surprisingly, Wyoming, who have had a few good runs, they didn't qualify this year. The Pac-12 had 5 spots up for grabs with 2 wild cards. The Pac-12 really struggled. They were the last conference to have an automatic spot be taken, and they only used up all 5 spots. They didn't have any teams in the wild card. I think was it Stanford? But anyway, I think it was Cal. But anyway, Oregon State, UCLA, Utah, and ASU all got in. Shockingly, no Wazoo, no Stanford, no Washington, and especially no USC Trojans. It's like, what the hell? They're like big star schools and they don't qualify? The SEC was the biggest thing. I gave 7 spots because of all the teams projected to win 8 games. So they got 7 spots with 2 wild cards. At the end of it, they only used up one wild card. They only had 8 teams get in. From the SEC East, there was Georgia, Missouri, and Kentucky who got in. No Florida, no Tennessee, and no South Carolina. Meanwhile, in the West, it was Bama, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and the shocker, Arkansas, my favorite school, got in. No Auburn, no LSU. Oh yeah, Mississippi State also got in. So yeah, no Auburn and no Mississippi State. It's like, I mean, LSU is like, what? LSU struggled. Florida played Missouri week before Thanksgiving. If Florida, whoever won got an automatic spot. Because Missouri beat Florida, they got in automatically. Florida did not get the wild card spot. It was win, you're in, lose, you're fucked. And Auburn, I think, also got 7 wins, but because of all the wild card spots being taken, they couldn't do much. And then the Sun Belt happened with 3 spots. I gave 3 spots to the Sun Belt and 3 wild card chances. 1 wild card was used, but anyway, Coastal Carolina, App State, Georgia State, and the Louisiana Raging Cajuns were all qualified. So yeah, all that. I also added 3 of the independent teams that were qualified. Notre Dame, Brigham Young, and Army also got in. Liberty also got 7 wins and got in as a wild card because they clinched fast. And then, because of how successful we were as an independent conference, you know, the Cutter, Canada State, and Blue Shirt Underground NCAA Empire State, we both got in, of course, automatically. My tournament, what can I do? But I did a simulated season of that conference, of all the created teams in the conference. And Dakota State, because they won a bowl game, they got in as the 3rd team. We were potentially given another spot because of how good Cleveland State was last year. But nobody else won a bowl game, so we didn't claim that 4th spot. So that means, we have 64 teams. Now, of course, there's a controversy because of how Louisville got bit because they had 7 wins. Auburn got bit because of that. Florida got bit. And also Purdue, who also would have got bit. So I'm going to share with you, if I can get to my freaking thing. I'm going to share with you. Yeah, there were a lot of teams and all that. So, yeah. It was a tight race. So anyway. So here's how the format goes. When I did this, like the first week was October 23rd because I figured a lot of teams had 7 wins. So on October 23rd, the top 4 schools that had qualified for this with 7 wins, or, 7 in real life for 6+1 on the 13th game, would qualify. The top 4 schools based on college football rankings got in. And I made a change as normal. 2 schools from the SEC got 1 seeds, where in fact I would try to make it as even as possible. So it was Georgia and Bama who qualified as 1 seeds. Cincy and Oklahoma also were 1 seeds based on their rankings. And then I did Serpentine, and then the next 2 seed based on luck of the draw. So what I did for every week was that I would put them in, there were certain spots. There were 24 spots that had to be filled by October 23rd. So I did the 1 seeds based on their rankings. But then what happened is that the other 20 teams, I randomly selected. I used random number generators and put them in spots from 2 to 6. Now, as usual, no team from the same conference per 2021 rules, could meet in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs until the Sweet 16. And thankfully, though, I did have to make a few shuffles, but nothing too big of a deal. So I'm going to show you the bracket. Hopefully you can see that. Obviously, I didn't get the one that's typed. So this is the road to the Final Four in the Rose Bowl. Hope you can see that. All right, so I have the Sweet 16 with me. So hopefully you can see that. All right, so in the the first bowl group is the Sugar Bowl group, and Georgia was number 1 at that time. Of course, the whole field was set before today. So anyway, so Georgia, because they like the Sugar Bowl, they could have. Well, I mean, the Peach Bowl is not a Big Five, so Georgia went to said, let's go to the Sugar Bowl. So Georgia's okay. So Georgia got the overall number 1 seed and would host the Sugar Bowl and all that. So in the Sugar Bowl, here are the matchups. Marshall qualified as the 16th seed. They'll take on Georgia. The winner of that game gets the winner of the 8-9 game between Utah State and Clemson. Now, of course, you see the big black circles. Those are teams that will host games. Yeah, there'll be. So they get to host first round games and all that. Now, Utah State didn't have a good football stadium, so Clemson will get to host the 8-9 game. And then the 13-4 game is Texas Tech versus SMU. Now you'd be thinking, wait a minute, isn't that a mistake? They're in the same conference. Actually, no. SMU is in Conference USA and Texas Tech is Big 12. So technically they can bump into each other. And SMU gets to host that game. And the number 12 seed is Arizona State. They take on number 5, Texas San Antonio. And San Antonio gets to host that game and all that. Because the reason why they get to host is because, they were the first Sun Belt team to qualify. So, yeah. So that matchup happens. Make this a little better. The next matchup, the lower group, the 14-3 and the 11-6. So the 11-6 matchup is Arkansas versus Fresno. And since Fresno was the first Mountain West team to qualify, they get to host Arkansas. Otherwise, it would have been in Arkansas. And the 14-3 matchup is Western Kentucky, Notre Dame. So that's a huge one for Notre Dame, especially hosting Western Kentucky. And the 10-7 matchup in the Sugar Bowl bracket is Utah versus Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois is the first MAC team to qualify, got to get a home game. I would probably have been at Utah or a neutral site. And the other matchup is the 15-2 between Boise and Michigan State. Now you're thinking, Boise, number 15, how? Well, they didn't qualify that fast, and, they did qualify somehow. So, yeah, so you have a Boise-Michigan State matchup, 15 versus 2. Down below in the Cotton Bowl bracket, which is where the overall number 4 seed, Oklahoma, was. Oklahoma will first play East Carolina on their turf. The 8-9 matchup is Minnesota hosting UAB. So that's a big matchup, Minnesota at the Metrodome. Of course, this game is from 2011, so they don't know that the University of Minnesota moved away. The 13-4, 12-5. 13 versus 4 is Dakota's qualifying as the 13th seed. They'll take on number 4, Pitt, at Pitt Stadium. And the 12-5 is Missouri. After beating Florida, they get the 12th seed. They get to host UTEP. Now you're thinking, UTEP deserves to have a home game because of how, UTEP hosts as the Sun Belt Stadium. The only problem is there's also another caveat. The rule is in the first round, any school that hosts their team's games and hosts a major bowl like the Sun Bowl cannot host in the first round. So they would have to be on the road or at the mercy of a neutral site game. And thankfully for Missouri, they said, let's do it. The 11-6 matchup is Wisconsin versus Lafayette. And Wisconsin gets to host it because Lafayette was not that fast qualifying. We're not the first Sun Belt team, so they don't get the home game. It'll be in Wisconsin. And the 14-3 matchup is UCLA versus Texas A&M. Now, UCLA would not have been allowed to host because of their big stadium being the Rose Bowl and all that. So, yeah, that's a huge one. But, yeah, well, Texas A&M is the 3 seed anyway. And all that. And then you got the 10-7 matchup is NC State versus Liberty. That's at a neutral site because both stadiums didn't really go so well, so they drew lots, and I don't remember who got what stadium that'll be in. But anyway, the 15-2 matchup is Toledo versus Ohio State. Strange how you got two Ohio schools having to fight each other. All right, so on the right side of the bracket is the other side, the Fiesta Bowl bracket. That's where the 2-seed Cincinnati Bearcats would be. Now remember, this is at the time. So since he's number two, overall. So since he's the 1 seed would host number 16 Mississippi State. So that could be a mismatch. The 8-9 matchup is Baylor versus Eastern Michigan. And surprisingly, Baylor said they will not host the matchup against EMU. So they decided to put it in a neutral site for some strange reason. And then you got yourself the 13-4, 12-5 matchup. 13 versus 4 is Army versus San Diego State. Now San Diego State's the 4 seed, but because that stadium hosts the Holiday Bowl among other things, they cannot host at home. So Army gets the home game. And Army says, sure, we'll take it at home. And then you got yourself the 12-5. That's UCF versus Central Carolina, who were the first Sun Belt team. No, I think San Antonio got a home game somehow. And then Coastal Carolina got another one. Oh, UTC, San Antonio's Conference USA. Sorry. And then the Sun Bowl. And then Coastal Carolina was the first team from the Sun Belt. So they get to host UCF. UCF would have been host anyway because their stadium hosts like the Citrus Bowl. And then 11-6, 14-3. 11 versus 6 is K-State versus Virginia. So that will actually be a neutral site game because both teams don't agree on hosting it. And the 14-3 matchup is Kentucky versus Iowa at Iowa. So, yep. And then you got yourself the 10-7, 15-2. 10 versus 7 is Ole Miss versus Blue Shirt Underground. BSU beat us, Canada State, in a matchup to see who gets the 7 seed, who gets a 7 seed. And then the 15-2 matchup is Boston College, Oregon. So yeah, that's huge. All right, and then down below in the Orange Bowl bracket, that's Bama's bracket. They will face number 16 Central Michigan. And the 8-9 matchup is App State versus Nevada. But that's at a neutral site too. They both agreed to have it at a neutral site. The 13-4 matchup is Oregon State versus Oklahoma State at Oklahoma State. And the 12-5 matchup is Penn State versus BYU. So that's huge that BYU gets the home game. That one. The 11-6 is Western Michigan versus Houston at Houston Stadium. And the 14-3 is Georgia State facing Wake Forest, but they will play in a neutral site. And then in the bottom half, the last one, the 10-7, 15-2, guess where we are? We are the 10 seed. We face Air Force at Air Force Stadium in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And the 15-2 matchup is Miami versus Michigan. Miami didn't qualify that fast, so that's why they got booted. So I'm going to tell you guys, so that's the first round matchups. Now, I will, of course, fill the brackets and give you guys stuff round by round, the second round, where everyone is and how and all that. So, of course, I have to keep my scores open, make sure I get all the scores. And there might be some fantastic finishes I might share with you and all that. So, the highlight of the first round. But anyway, that's how the tournament is set up, and it will be played this way. So, the first round starts December 6th, that'd be tomorrow, and will run till December 12th, that being Sunday. So it's 7 days of games. Each day has 4 games, except for Saturday, which will have 8 games on the docket, because, 8 times 4. 4 games a day, eating 8 days, right? Mm-hmm. But Saturday's a big important day, so they get 8 games. And unofficially, 7 different college football providers will broadcast games. Monday's games will be due to CBS Sportsnet. the CBS Sports Network will technically host the Monday games. ESPN will have the Tuesday games. Wednesday games are ESPN2. Thursday will be on Fox. Friday on NBC. Saturday, CBS has them, and ABC will have the Sunday games. So the first game on the docket will be San Diego State versus Army on Monday, December 6th, and then it will be Penn State BYU, and then the nightcaps will be UAB Minnesota and ASU versus San Antonio. On Tuesday, the lineup is set. Dakotas will face Pitt first, and then it's Nevada App State, but they randomly selected, and Wyoming gets to host the game at Wyoming Stadium because they didn't qualify. They can host it. So Nevada and App State will play there, and then at night, Eastern Michigan will face Baylor, and Texas, the University of Texas, Longhorn Stadium will host the EMU Baylor game, and Arkansas will go to Fresno to finish off day 2. Day 3 will be Wednesday, December 8th, and first game on the docket is Georgia State Wake, and the neutral site randomizer has them at Florida State at Doak Campbell Stadium, so they'll be hosting some games. Utah and Northern Illinois will go second. Third will be Ole Miss versus BSU, and Lafayette versus Wisconsin. On Thursday, the order goes like this. Boise will face Michigan State first, and then UCLA will take on Texas A&M. Third on the docket will be Mississippi State Cincy and Oregon State Oklahoma State to finish off. Friday will be Texas Tech versus SMU. K-State will face Virginia. Randomization, Louisville gets to host the game at Papa John's Stadium. UTEP, Missouri, and Western Michigan, Houston will fill that day up. Saturday will be crazy with 8 games. Actually, we do not have a set in stone about which games will be day games and which one will be night games. So we have to keep an eyeball open. There's only one game. All the games are played basically in the Eastern or Central time zones, except for Boston College, Oregon. So I'll have to figure something out. And then on Sunday, the order of operations will be NC State versus Liberty, but that game will be held at the Yale Bowl in New Haven, Connecticut. Yale's eligible to host it because the stadium is big. Utah State, Clemson, UCF, Coastal Carolina, and us against Air Force. We got the last game on the first round docket. Of course, I will talk about the second round schedule, who's playing where, and what the brackets are in the next video. Of course, this is a prelude to the 2021-22 tournament. Anyway.